They thought he was just another man. Someone passing through, too quiet to be a threat. But that was their first mistake. The wind had a sharp edge that afternoon, slicing across the cracked highway that led into Miller's Diner. A small, forgotten spot along a desolate road in New Mexico, where time seemed to stand still and faces rarely changed. The neon sign out front flickered weakly, buzzing like it was tired of its own job. Inside, the smell of grease and old coffee lingered like a memory that refused to fade. A dark green pickup truck rolled into the parking lot. The engine cut off, and the driver sat still for a moment, watching the diner through the windshield. His name was Marcus Reed, and to anyone looking, he was just a man getting lunch. But there was more to Marcus than anyone here could have guessed. He stepped out slowly, the gravel crunching under his boots. His frame was lean but strong, the kind that came from years of discipline, not vanity. He adjusted his jacket, pulled down the brim of his faded cap, and walked toward the diner door. The bell above it rang softly as he entered. Heads turned. Every conversation in the room seemed to pause, just long enough to feel the weight of silence. The kind of silence that carried judgment before words ever did. Marcus scanned the room without hurry. Vinyl booths cracked from age. A jukebox in the corner coated in dust. A counter lined with chrome that had long lost its shine. The waitress, behind it, looked up, tired eyes, a forced smile, and then looked back down, pretending to wipe a cup that was already clean. He nodded politely and found a seat near the window. Old habits. He liked to face the exit. Across the room sat a group of bikers, 6 of them, loud and restless. Their jackets were marked with a faded skull emblem. They were the kind of men who wanted attention, and in a quiet town like this they usually got it. Until now. Marcus didn't look their way. He simply ordered a black coffee and a plate of chicken and fries. The waitress hesitated when she took his order, glancing toward the bikers like she needed permission to move. Marcus noticed, but he said nothing. He never needed to. As he waited, the low hum of laughter started again from the corner table. Then came the words, sharp, careless, and meant to wound. "Well, would you look at that?" One of them sneered. The man's name was Roy, broad, shoulders, thick beard, a voice that always sounded like he was trying to prove something. "Guess we got ourselves a tourist." The others chuckled, the sound scraping against the air like sandpaper. Marcus didn't respond. He stirred his coffee gently and took a sip, his expression calm. That calmness, that stillness, only made them angrier. Roy leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You deaf, pal, or just rude?" The waitress placed Marcus's plate in front of him. Her hand trembled just slightly. Marcus offered her a soft nod of thanks. It wasn't her fight. The diner felt smaller now. The kind of small that comes when danger fills the room. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, seemed louder, sharper. Marcus stayed still. He had been in worse places, much worse. Roy stood up, his boots thudding against the linoleum floor. He walked toward Marcus's table, slow, deliberate, the grin never leaving his face. "Hey, buddy," he said. "I'm talking to you." Marcus set his coffee down carefully. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his eyes were steady, unreadable. "Something I can help you with?" he asked, his tone calm, not defensive. Roy's grin faltered for half a heartbeat. He wasn't expecting calm, he was expecting fear. "You're sitting where you don't belong," Roy said. "That booth's ours. Always has been." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "There a name on it?" A few quiet chuckles rippled through the diner from other tables, cautious, nervous. Roy's jaw tightened, the kind of man who didn't like being laughed at. "Don't get smart," he snapped, slamming his palm on the table hard enough to make the salt shaker jump. Marcus didn't move. His hand stayed on his cup, fingers loose, body relaxed. That composure burned worse than any insult. The other bikers were watching now, waiting for Roy to finish what he started. The waitress froze behind the counter. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Roy took a step closer. Last chance, stranger, he said. You either move, or I make you move. Marcus's voice was quiet when he replied, You really don't want to do that. The words hung there, soft but heavy, like the air before a storm. Roy laughed, though there was a tremor under it. Oh, I think I do, he said. And with that, he reached out, grabbing for Marcus's shirt collar. What happened next, no one saw coming. Roy's hand barely brushed the fabric of Marcus's jacket before it stopped, caught in midair like time itself had frozen. Marcus's grip closed around his wrist, firm and unshakable. The sound that followed wasn't loud, just a quiet gasp from Roy, sharp and confused. For the first time, the biker's grin vanished. Let go, Marcus said softly. It wasn't a threat. It was a suggestion wrapped in authority, the kind that came from someone who'd been obeyed before. Roy tried to yank his hand back, but it didn't move. Marcus's fingers were like iron. A hush fell over the diner. The waitress's breathing hitched. Even the jukebox, silent for years, seemed to hum with tension. Roy's voice broke the quiet, rough with frustration. You think you're tough, huh? He barked. Marcus looked him dead in the eyes. I think you're making a mistake. Then Marcus released him. Just like that, no shove. No show of strength. Roy stumbled back a step, more from shock than force. That calm release, that total control, only made him angrier. Behind him, one of the bikers, skinny with long, greasy hair, laughed under his breath. Come on, Roy, don't let him punk you like that. The laugh ignited something dangerous. Roy straightened up, his pride stung raw. Get up, all of you, he snapped. We'll show this clown where he is. Chairs scraped. Boots hit the floor. 5 bikers now, spreading around Marcus's booth, closing in like wolves circling prey. But Marcus didn't move. He didn't even blink. He simply sighed and took one last sip of his coffee, then set the cup down gently. You sure this is how you want your day to go? He asked. That made a few of them hesitate. Just for a second. But pride is louder than reason, and Roy had plenty of it. Outside, he growled. Marcus looked at him, expression unreadable. Right here's fine. Something in the way he said it made the room feel heavier. The waitress whispered, Don't. But her voice vanished under the sound of movement. Roy lunged first. He swung wide, his arm cutting through the air like a bat, but Marcus wasn't there anymore. He shifted sideways, fluid, almost lazy, and Roy's momentum carried him straight past the booth. In that same breath, Marcus's hand found his shoulder and redirected his weight. Roy slammed into the counter, knocking over a plate of half-eaten pie. He groaned, dazed. The others froze for a heartbeat, long enough to wonder what they'd just seen. Marcus's eyes stayed calm. You don't have to do this, he said, his tone quiet, controlled. Walk away. That was all it took to flip the switch. The wiry man with stringy hair yelled and charged. Marcus turned, sidestepping again. His elbow met the man's ribs in one swift motion, sending him crashing into a chair that splintered beneath him. 2 down. The next one came in fast, a heavier man with tattoos running down his neck. Marcus blocked the punch, caught his wrist, and twisted. The biker cried out, his knees giving way as Marcus guided him down gently, like he was putting him to sleep instead of fighting him. 3. The sound of fists hitting the air, boots scuffing the floor, the metallic ring of a knife flicking open. One of them had pulled a blade, trembling with adrenaline. Marcus didn't flinch. He took one step forward, and that was enough to make the man falter. Put it down, Marcus said. No yelling. No bravado. Just certainty. The biker hesitated, then swung anyway, sloppy, desperate. Marcus moved like water, catching the man's arm mid-strike. In a blink, the knife was gone, skittering across the floor. The man fell with it. 4. Roy was still on his feet, his face red, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He charged again, roaring, blind with humiliation. Marcus didn't meet his strength with strength. He met it with precision. A pivot, a twist of the hips, and Roy was on the floor before he realized what happened. 5. The diner was silent again, except for the sound of heavy breathing. Every eye in the room was on Marcus now. He looked at the fallen men, one clutching his ribs, another groaning into the linoleum, and then at Roy, who stared up at him, dazed and defeated. I warned you, Marcus said quietly. His tone was gentle, almost regretful. The waitress finally exhaled. her trembling hand still gripping the phone she never got to use. An old man at the counter muttered, "Good Lord," under his breath. Nobody else spoke. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out a few folded bills, and placed them neatly beside his plate. Then he looked at the waitress. "Thank you for the coffee," he said. He turned and walked toward the door. The bell jingled softly as he stepped out into the wind, but the story didn't end there. Inside the diner, eyes followed him. And outside in the parking lot, someone was waiting, the one who hadn't fought, the quiet one with the cold stare. He was about to make the biggest mistake of all. The sun had dipped lower by the time Marcus stepped outside. The wind carried a chill, brushing across the gravel lot where his truck waited. He adjusted his jacket and took a slow breath, steadying himself. He didn't look back at the diner. He didn't need to, but the air behind him felt heavy, as if the story wasn't finished yet. That's when he saw him, the last biker standing beside a scratched-up Harley near the gas pump. He hadn't lifted a finger during the fight. His arms were crossed and his jaw was tight. His name was Clay. His stare carried something different, something Marcus had seen before in men who thought they were smarter than the rest. "Didn't think you'd walk out that easy," Clay said, voice low, words drawn out like smoke. Marcus stopped halfway to his truck. "You planning to make it harder?" Clay tilted his head. "You embarrassed my crew in there." "They won't forget that." "Neither will I." Marcus didn't respond. He just opened his truck door and glanced at the road ahead. The silence between them was thick, like a test. Clay took a slow step closer. "You military?" Marcus closed the door halfway, resting a hand on the frame. "Does it matter?" "Yeah," Clay said. "It matters when a man moves like you did." Marcus studied him. "You really want to know?" Clay nodded once, cautious but curious. Marcus's voice was calm. "I used to serve, but that was a long time ago." Clay smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Figures. You walk like someone who's seen ghosts." Marcus didn't answer. He wasn't in the mood for nostalgia. He'd buried enough memories already. Clay looked toward the diner windows where faces still lingered behind the glass. "You might think you're some kind of hero," he said. "But out here folks don't care what you did. They just care that you don't belong." Marcus shut the door with a quiet click. "Then I'll keep not belonging," he said. He started the engine. The growl of the truck broke the silence. Clay took another step forward, his voice rising over the noise. "You think walking away makes you strong?" he shouted. "You're just scared to finish it." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He turned down the window, his tone still level. "The only thing worth finishing is a meal. Everything else, walk away from it while you can." For a second, it looked like Clay might lunge. His fists clenched, his body tensed. But something in Marcus's stare stopped him cold. It wasn't threat, it was certainty. A man who'd seen real danger didn't need to act tough. Clay's breath slowed. He looked away first. Marcus shifted into gear. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching over gravel. He didn't glance back again. The road ahead stretched endlessly, sun bleeding into gold across the horizon. For most men, that road meant freedom. For Marcus, it meant distance. The farther he drove, the quieter the world became. And that quiet was something he'd earned. A few miles down, he passed a rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Fairvale." The letters were faded, but the town still clung to life. A few shops, a gas station, a rundown motel. He didn't plan to stay long, but he needed fuel. The station attendant, a kid barely out of high school, looked up from behind the counter. "Evening, sir. Heading far?" Marcus handed over some bills.
"Just passing through," the kid grinned.
"You and everyone else who doesn't want to stay here." Marcus gave a small smile. "Can't blame them." As the tank filled, he leaned against the truck and stared out at the horizon. His reflection flickered in the glass window of the convenience store. Tired eyes, calm face, the kind of look that hides more than it shows. He thought about the diner. Not the fight, but the people inside. The fear in the waitress's eyes. The old man at the counter. The quiet awe that followed the violence. He didn't want to be remembered for that. He just wanted peace. But peace was hard to keep when the world refused to understand it. As Marcus screwed the cap back on the tank, his phone buzzed in the truck. He slid inside and checked the screen. A message blinked from an old contact, someone he hadn't heard from in years. Just one line, "They found you." Marcus stared at the words, unmoving. The air around him seemed to thicken again. The past he thought he'd buried had just knocked on his door. He started the truck again, this time faster. The road stretched out ahead, long and empty, but suddenly it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a countdown. The diner, the bikers, even Clay, they weren't the real danger. They were just noise. The real story was catching up, and Marcus knew there was no outrunning it this time. He pressed the gas. The truck roared down the highway, its headlights cutting through the darkening sky. And behind him, the world he'd tried to leave behind was finally beginning to stir. The night air thickened as Marcus drove. The sky stretched wide and empty above him, streaked with the fading glow of dusk. The road ahead was silent except for the hum of the tires. He hadn't expected the message. He hadn't expected anyone to still be looking. He tried to push it out of his mind, focusing on the steady rhythm of the highway lines flashing past. But the words stayed with him. They found you. It had been 4 years since he walked away from that world. 4 years since the last mission went sideways. Since the night he stopped believing in orders that didn't make sense. He'd vanished without a trace, just a name erased from a list. He didn't think anyone would bother digging him up again. At the next town, he pulled into a roadside motel, the kind that rented rooms by the week or the hour, depending on who you were. The neon vacancy sign buzzed like an insect caught in a jar. He paid cash at the front desk. The clerk didn't ask questions. Inside the room, the air smelled faintly of cleaning solution and old carpet. Marcus dropped his duffel on the bed and sat for a long moment, elbows on his knees, head bowed. He wasn't afraid of being found. He was tired of having to disappear. He unlocked his phone again, scrolling to the message. No name, no number, just the text. He typed a single reply. Who's asking? The screen stayed blank. No response. He set the phone down and leaned back in the chair, eyes drifting to the window. Beyond the glass, a single streetlight flickered over the parking lot, casting long, twitching shadows. One of them moved when the wind didn't. Marcus stood slowly. He walked to the curtain, staying just far enough to keep himself hidden. A black sedan sat across the lot, engine off, windows dark. It hadn't been there when he arrived. He exhaled through his nose. So it begins, he muttered quietly. His hand moved to the duffel. Inside wasn't much. Some clothes, a few tools, an old knife wrapped in cloth, and a worn photograph. He glanced at the photo briefly. 3 men in uniform, arms slung over each other's shoulders, all smiling like the world still made sense. One of them was him. The others were gone. The sound of a car door clicking open broke the quiet. He looked up. 2 silhouettes stepped out of the sedan. They weren't bikers. They weren't locals either. The way they moved was careful, practiced. Government or military. Either way, they weren't friends. Marcus moved to the light switch and flicked it off. The room fell into darkness. He slipped out the back door quietly, boots soft on the pavement. The alley behind the motel led toward the open highway. He didn't run. He walked steady and controlled. The men reached the front door moments later. He could hear them knock, then force it open. They moved through the room, one sweeping a flashlight, the other muttering something under his breath. By the time they realized he was gone, Marcus was already half a mile down the road, the motel lights shrinking behind him. He didn't need to know who they were to understand what it meant. Someone had decided his silence was no longer acceptable. He stopped beside an abandoned billboard and watched the empty road stretch both ways. He could go north, cross state lines by morning. But running wouldn't solve it. Not this time. He pulled the phone from his pocket again and opened a number he hadn't dialed in years. The name still read Sarah Callan. She'd been the last person from his old team still alive, the only one who might know why they'd found him. He pressed call. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, wary but strong. Marcus. He exhaled, relief and caution tangled together. Hey Sarah, there was a pause. You shouldn't be using this line, she said quietly. They're tracking everything. Already figured, he replied. You sent the message? No, but I heard whispers. Someone reopened the file. You need to move. I'm tired of running, her tone softened. Then you'd better be ready to finish what they started. Static crackled for a moment before the call dropped. He stared at the phone, her words echoing in his head. Finish what they started. The past wasn't just finding him. It was pulling him back in. He climbed into his truck again, the same old engine groaning awake. The fuel gauge hovered near empty, but he didn't care. He drove back toward the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness like blades. Miles later, the road signs blurred together. Santa Rosa, Las Mesa, Rockford. He didn't slow down. The further he went, the more the night seemed to press against the windows. And then from behind him, faint at first but growing louder, came the low rumble of engines. Not one, several. He checked the mirror. Headlights appeared on the horizon, too steady to be random traffic. His jaw tightened. The bikers weren't done after all. But this wasn't revenge anymore. Someone had set them on him, using them as bait. The hunt had begun again. He pressed harder on the gas, feeling the truck surge forward. Ahead, the desert stretched endlessly into the dark. He didn't know how far this would go or who was waiting at the end of the line. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about hiding. He was thinking about ending it. The past was chasing him down, and this time, he planned to meet it head on. The desert night opened around him like a vast dark ocean. The wind rushed through the half-open window, carrying the scent of sand and gasoline. The rumble behind him grew heavier. More engines, closer. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't look back again. He didn't have to. He could hear them gaining. The truck's engine strained as he veered off the highway onto a dirt road that twisted between low dunes and skeletal brush. Dust billowed up behind him, swallowing the moonlight. The headlights of his pursuers bounced and flared in the rearview mirror. 5 of them, maybe 6. He recognized the sound, heavy bikes. The same gang from the diner, but not alone this time. The men from the sedan had joined them. Someone had decided to merge revenge with a mission. A gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet hit the rear fender, sparking metal. Marcus pressed the pedal harder. He didn't curse, didn't panic. His mind slipped into the old rhythm: calculate, adapt, move. He cut the headlights, guiding the truck by memory and moonlight until he saw the outline of an abandoned quarry ahead. He turned sharply down a slope. Gravel sliding under the tires, the engine echoing between stone walls. The bikers followed, shouting, headlights slicing through the dust. He stopped the truck near a ridge and stepped out, moving quickly into the shadows. The cold air stung his skin. The first biker roared down the slope, shouting something he couldn't make out. Marcus waited until the man was close enough to see the whites of his eyes. Then he moved, swift, silent. A single motion, a twist of the arm, and the rider was off the bike, hitting the ground hard. The engine sputtered out beside him. Another came, and another. Marcus moved through them with the same calm precision he'd shown in the diner. No wasted movement. No noise, just control. The quarry rang with chaos, but his breathing stayed steady. The sedan arrived next. The 2 men from the motel stepped out, armed, scanning the shadows. One called out, "Reed, you can't run this time." Marcus didn't answer. He was already behind them. He disarmed the first one cleanly. A strike to the wrist and a sweep of the leg. The second swung the butt of his gun. Marcus caught it, shoved him back against the car door, and pressed his forearm against his throat. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man struggled, gasping. "Division 12, he choked. "They said you went dark. They said you had files, classified." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Files were destroyed years ago." "Not all of them," the man rasped. "They think you kept copies. You're a liability." Marcus released him and stepped back. The man coughed, clutching his throat. "You were supposed to disappear," he said. "You were too good at it." The words settled like dust. Marcus turned his gaze toward the horizon where faint light touched the sky. Dawn was coming, but the night still had one breath left in it. Roy stumbled into view from behind a fallen bike, face bruised, pride still burning. He pointed a shaking pistol at Marcus. "You should have finished me when you had the chance," he snarled. Marcus didn't flinch. "I don't finish people. I finish fights." Roy's finger tightened on the trigger, but hesitation flickered. He was angry, not suicidal. Marcus took one slow step closer. "Put it down. Go home." Roy's breath came hard. He lowered the gun an inch, then raised it again in defiance. Before he could pull the trigger, a sharp command cut through the quarry. "Stand down, Roy." Everyone turned. A woman's voice echoed across the rocks. She stepped forward from the ridge, wearing a dark jacket and boots coated in dust. Her hair was tied back, her eyes sharp. Marcus knew that voice. Sarah. She stopped a few feet away, scanning the scene. The downed bikers, the agents on the ground, the broken quiet. "You really know how to make an entrance," she said softly. "You sent them?" She shook her head. "I followed them." "You think I'd send amateurs to find you?" Marcus looked at her, weary but relieved. "Why now?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "They're cleaning up old files. Everyone involved in Operation Nullpoint." "You, me, everyone," They want to erase it completely. Marcus exhaled. And you? I'm done running too, she said. But we can't stay ghosts forever. We finish it our way. Roy, still on the ground, looked between them, confusion cutting through his anger. What the hell are you people? Sarah's gaze shifted toward him. The kind of people who used to make sure the world kept spinning, even when it shouldn't have. The dawn crept higher, painting the rocks gold. The bikers who could still move backed away slowly, dragging their fallen with them. Roy hesitated, then turned and followed, his pride too broken to argue. The agents climbed back into their car, bruised and silent, knowing better than to test fate twice. Within minutes, the quarry was empty except for Marcus and Sarah, standing in the growing light. She watched the horizon. So what now? Marcus looked down the endless stretch of desert road.
Now we stop waiting for the past to find us.
We find it first, Sarah smiled faintly. Back to the old days? Not the same, he said. This time we end it clean. They stood there a moment longer, the wind whispering across the sand. Then Marcus walked back to his truck. He opened the door, glanced once at Sarah, and nodded. She climbed in beside him. The engine started, steady and sure. They drove out of the quarry and back onto the open road, the rising sun washing the desert in light. The world behind them faded into silence. Miles passed before Sarah finally spoke again. You think people ever change, Marcus? He kept his eyes on the road. No, but they learn what's worth fighting for. She nodded slowly. The horizon stretched ahead, endless and bright. For the first time in years, the road didn't feel like escape. It felt like purpose. And somewhere beyond that horizon, the ghosts of their past were waiting. But Marcus Reed wasn't running anymore. He was coming for them. The wind carried the sound of the truck until it vanished into the open desert, leaving only the quiet behind. A quiet that finally belonged to him.